Buildings Academy podcast with Phil Zito, episode 514. Hey folks, Phil Zito here, and welcome to episode 514 of the Smart Buildings Academy podcast. In this episode, we are going to be going through how to make the business case for training your people in the building automation field. Now, if you're not in building automation, maybe you're in HVAC, access control, lighting, etc. This is going to apply across the board because it's the same problem, same calculations, same issues. As always, everything will be available at podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/514. Once again, that is podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/514. And if I can ask a big favor of you, we provide these episodes free to you every week. If you can go and do us a favor, if you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and even make a comment. That helps the algorithm, helps us kind of spread the podcast. If you're on LinkedIn, please comment and share. You just hit share and it's pretty straightforward. If you're on Facebook, like and share. And then if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please consider leaving us a 5-star review if you find these episodes valuable. It really, really does help. All right, so let's dive in. So in the world of building automation, labor is the most expensive resource, and training quite often is the first thing cut when budgets get tight. I mean, you could argue travel gets cut too, but I mean, right off the bat, if you're thinking of your personnel, it's training. That's the first thing that gets cut. And, I thought about that quite a bit because we often hear, hey, there's not enough people in the industry, where our people are unskilled, we can't staff jobs, et cetera, et cetera. So then why is it that the one thing that you would think would solve all those issues is getting cut? And what I tend to find is the reason it gets cut is because people don't know how to justify. Now, if you watch the previous episode I did, I think it was like 510, maybe. I might be remembering wrong. I went through more of the financials around training and development, and here we're really honing in on the business case. The issue I find is that if you have slippage, if you have senior techs being burnt out by callbacks, you're completely dependent on your contractors. If you're on the owner's side, can't staff work. The people you're staffing work with are just going and carrying tools around and not actually doing anything. You most likely have a training and development issue. And the hidden costs of untrained and or undertrained technicians, by the end of this episode, I really hope you agree, they vastly outweigh the upfront expense of training. I think back to when I was leading a operations team and, not due to any genius on my end, but I just happened to understand how BACnet worked. And so every project that had a complex BACnet integration, it had to wait until I was freed up. And so I was leading a team, but also having to do all the complex BACnet integrations. And that was because I, as a leader, did not take the time. And I want to be clear on this. Training is not just a formal class. Training can be taking your people out of the field for half a day and teaching them something. I didn't take the time to teach my team how BACnet worked, how actually, if you really understand BACnet, it's pretty predictable. It pretty much is configured the same way every time. And because I didn't do that, anytime BACnet training came up or a BACnet integration came up that was complex, well, guess what? The folks had to go and rely on me, and that's not very scalable. So first thing, let's dive into the costs of training. There's obviously direct costs. Direct costs would be the cost of the training. It would be the cost of any travel. So airfare, lodging, etc., assuming you're not doing online training. And so if we took, a $2,000 course plus $1,000 in travel, hotels, food, etc., those are direct costs. Additionally, another direct cost is the time that you're not being able to bill the technician out. So if a technician bills out for $100 an hour, let's just use simple math, and it's a 40-hour class, you've lost $4,000. And then there may be some admin coordination, scheduling, manager's time. So those are some hidden costs. Those are maybe $200, $300 per student. So if you take a student out of the field for a week, you lose $4,000 of revenue, plus you've got $2,000 to $3,000 of costs. So you're in about $7,000 to $8,000 on a technician. However, we need to think about this differently, because at first glance, you're like, okay, that's $8,000 to take someone out of the field for a week to learn a class. And how exactly is that going to provide any payback? Well, let's just go through some scenarios here. The first is going to be, let's say that you have a slippage rate, and we're not going to get into percentages. We're just going to use round numbers here. Of every project, you're doing about 20 hours of rework. And so we know 20 hours times $100, that is, right, $2,000, because we said a technician bills out at 100, and that's, $2,000 that we couldn't bill out. We agreed that the training all in was about $8,000. Now let's say that training is able to eliminate that 20 hours, and let's say you have 10 projects a year. So we're using big round numbers here. So just go with me on this. You got 10 projects, you eliminate 20 hours of rework, that's 200 hours of rework at $100 a pop, right? You're at $20,000. So your training, which cost $8,000 to $10,000, and now for the foreseeable future of that technician working for you, you now have $20,000 of cost avoidance, $10,000 in that first year. So you got a 6-month payback. It's very simple numbers. I hope you all followed with me on that, right? I said the class travel plus per diem plus downtime was about $8,000, 10 projects a year, 20 hours of rework per project. That's actually fairly reasonable on a lot of projects. I'm not saying you should strive towards that, but it is very possible to have that. You avoid that now due to like some training on installation or theory or electrical or IT or whatever is causing the issue. And now you're avoiding 20,000. So 8,000 or 20,000 minus 8,000, that's 12,000 in profit now, or avoidance. And it's not profit because the billable rate has cost in it, but go with me on this. So now you are looking at roughly a 6-month payback. And then everything forward is just gravy. It's just added efficiency. Okay, so let's talk about the one thing that I hear. I wouldn't say we hear it as often because we're an online training organization. We give folks access to the training for a full year. So we don't hear this as much as maybe a class that did 40 hours up front would hear, because, you go to a week class that's a week whack of folks who aren't out in the field. And the common thing I hear is if they're in training, they're not billing. I hear this especially from the service side of the organization, more than I hear it from the contracting, but I mean, it's true either way. So let's once again say a tech bills out, let's use 30 hours a week. And let's say that that's $100 an hour once again. So $3,000 of revenue. So we've lost $3,000 that we could have billed out. And here's the thing though. It's easy to see that, right? You could do that all day long. You can just check that mental box and say, hey, this person is out of the field. We've lost $3,000. And it's easy to do that. That's a quick way to have your boss or yourself shut down training. But let's talk about without training. This is where, I've talked about in past episodes. You can see them. You can go to podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com and you can search out budgeting. You can search out finance, those kind of keywords, and you'll see past episodes where we've talked about how do you budget projects? How do you manage projects? But let's say you're actually tracking your projects, which is what I recommend you do. You're tracking the efficiency of your people by task, and you notice that someone is significantly slower than everyone else with installs. Let's say that using round numbers, your average tech can do a VAV box install in 15 minutes, but this other tech takes 30 minutes, double the amount of time. And so on a project of 100 VAV boxes, you're losing, what would that be? 15 into 100. I think that's, why am I trying to do this? Hold on. I got a calculator here. I'm like, why am I trying to do this? 100 divided by, some of you already know what it is. So you got 100 VAV boxes times 15 divided by 60, 25. That's 25 hours for that normally, and the other technician is double. They're 50 hours. So you're losing 25 hours on that project due to inefficiency. 25 times 100, right? That's going to be 2,500. So let's say that's per project. Once again, using our 10 projects, you're losing $25,000 just due to efficiency. Would it be worth taking that tech out of the field for a day? So $800. Would that be worth it to pull your tech in to the warehouse and have them go through wiring up a VAV box with you? Maybe bring all the techs in for half a day, make it a challenge, 4 hours times, let's say it's 10 techs. So 10 times 4, that's 40 times 100. That's $4,000, $4,000. But let's say you get them all to 15 minutes and a lot of them were at 30. You've reduced a lot of costs. I know I'm using a ton of numbers here, but you can start to see, if you really think through it, if you put pen to paper, there is a strong business case for training. And it doesn't just have to be a course. Look, I'd love it to be a course. We do amazing courses at Smart Buildings Academy, but it doesn't have to be a course. It can be a half-day working session on wiring up controllers. It can be, sitting there and doing a 2-hour session of just integrating things via BACnet and everyone doing the same thing and practicing and seeing who can do it faster, and then building a work order process or a work process document for it. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can do this. Let's talk about the cost of travel. I mean, the world's expensive. I live in a mountain town. I'm amazed just how expensive things are when I get, out of the mountains and I get into the valley and I'm like, oh my gosh, stuff's actually affordable. It is expensive in the world. And hotels, like anytime I go stay in a hotel in Phoenix, it's like $300 a night for the most rinky dinky hotel. It's terrible. It's a lot of money. So 5 days of that, I mean, I'm looking at what, 300 times 5, $1,500 just for a hotel, $20, $30 a meal, car rentals, all that jazz. You're adding up into the $3,000 just for travel. But there's other options, right? Obviously, we've built our name on online, self-paced, and then our instructor-led workforce development program. We've had great success with that. But you don't have to also send people to a class. Once again, I would love you to send someone to our training, but you can also bring them into the shop. You can bring them in for 4 hours and get very tactical. I think if you evaluate your projects and you really look at where things are falling apart, or if you're an owner and you look at your FMs and your PMs and your reactive maintenance, and you look at like, where do our calls come from? Where are our primary PMs? What systems are primarily failing? You could dial in pretty quickly like, hey, you know what? Most of the time we're having these issues. Maybe our valves are getting stuck, or we're not changing our filters and that's causing issues. Our sensors are getting out of calibration. Those kind of issues. Maybe we're overriding things and maybe we're having system failures because of that. Well, you can start to do micro trainings on these things, and they're not very expensive to do. So do not let the cost of travel keep you from doing training. There are options like online training, and there's also options like doing internal training on task specific things. All right, let's talk about skilled learning versus project needs. Okay, this was always the bane of my existence, and it's one of the things that factored into why we do a year's access for our training courses. Because I often get asked by our internal team, why do we do a year? Like, why do we do that? Because there are some people who will take full advantage of that year. And it's like, if we gave them 2 months, like selfishly, I'm going to let you in behind the scenes. Selfishly, if we constricted our courses to a month or to 60 days, which I don't know, maybe we'll do that in the future. I'm not sure. It's not on the roadmap, being transparent with you. But if we did that, we could drive people through training faster, which means because our courses work, we'd be able to sell more training. We'd be able to drive them through the courses faster, and then we'd be able to sell more training because they would succeed, they would see results, and we get more training. However, something that just philosophically, and I hate to speak in absolutes because stuff can always change, but something philosophically to me that is important as a former tech, as a former ops leader, is I would myself get sent to classes and I would come back and get stuck on a pneumatics job or stuck on a lawn job. And then 6 months later, I'm being told, hey, we sent you to that, at the time it was Johnson Controls, we sent you to that advanced CCT class, go program this central utility plant. And I'm like, I don't remember what I learned in that class because I didn't apply what I learned immediately after I learned it. I mean, sure, I had like baseline remembrance, but detailed remembrance, it took a little bit. I lost efficiency. So it's really important to us to have that 1 year training period. Now, where am I going on this? I'm not trying to turn this into an infomercial on us. What I'm going for is if you don't have that option, like if you can't have a training course that gives you access to revisit the material and go back to it, then you need to get really specific on what does my project pipeline look like? Like, what does my backlog look like? What projects am I going to be having my team work on? What do they need to know how to do? And then your course material, whether it's internal training, external training, just-in-time training, OJT, whatever it is, should align with your backlog, should align with your portfolio of work. If you're going in and you're doing a major hospital OR retrofit with, positively pressured rooms, negatively pressured rooms, 20, 30 air change ORs, air change per hour ORs, high velocity, mission critical, 100% outdoor air units with humidification, dehumidification, tight tolerances, then it would make sense for you to do like a strong hospital focused HVAC theory or a strong IO configuration or a complex programming course. Probably wouldn't make sense for you to be like, hey, we're going to send these people to an overview of Niagara. Doesn't make sense. And I get it. You have requirements that you have to meet from a certification perspective in order to comply with your channel requirements. I get it. But really think about what is the project that we're staffing up to do? And then based on the project we're staffing up to do, or projects we're staffing up to do, does our training align with those projects? Think about that. That's critically important. Now let's talk about efficiency. So far, right, we've went through what is the cost of training. We've talked about the cost of being out in the field. We've talked about the cost of travel. We've talked about making sure that your training is actually aligned to what your team is having to do. Let's talk about the impact on efficiency. Because this is something, the next two things I'm going to cover, right, are going to be the impact of efficiency and the impact on retention. These are kind of soft and squishy, but they don't have to be. They're actually fairly measurable if you've set up your systems like I've talked about in the past, where you're tracking task codes, you're having people individually log their task codes. So you're seeing like what tasks are they doing on the job. You're doing budgeting on projects by task code, etc. But efficiency is the name of the game. The reality of the world we live in is we've gone over a demographic cliff. For every year in the foreseeable future, there are going to be less and less people entering the workforce. We're below population replacement rate. It is just the reality of the world we live in. It's not good. And every industry is going to suffer. And unfortunately, unlike the programming world, because I've got family members who work for big tech companies as programmers, and they've told me about some of the efficiencies they get from AI. Unlike those spaces, that's not really going to be happening with the building automation space. Eventually, robots will take over. Probably not in my lifetime, but eventually they will be able to do skilled labor work. That is not something before I retire that's going to happen. So we've got to make do with what we've got. And what's the best way to make do with what we've got is to be efficient. How do you be efficient? Well, the first thing you have to do is measure your inefficiency. So you need to know what good looks like. In an ideal world, all of you would have watched our previous episode where I talk about estimating. I talk about project task breakouts. I talk about project management. And you would have set up your estimates so that you estimate install labor, programming labor, design labor, graphics labor, startup labor, all of those things, right? You've got buckets. You would have your technicians going in on their weekly time cards, and they would be allocating the appropriate task codes to those hours in those buckets, so that when you close out a project and you either positively or negatively reestimate that project upon closeout to capture more of that margin or lose margin, you would actually know, hey, by person, by task, this is my efficiency. I budgeted for this. I executed that. I'm either more efficient or I'm less efficient. Once you know these efficiencies, then you're able to real quickly say, okay, if our average technician is 85% efficient on install, but we've got 3 technicians that are 50% efficient on install, if we're able to take those 3 technicians and get them to 85% efficiency, that equates to X less hours of labor, which equates to Y more dollars of revenue and profit. So it's a very simple equation if you're tracking. And this can be as simple as project efficiency. Ideally, you want it by task, by person. But once you start to measure this and you start to capture this, it becomes very easy to then say, okay, we're going to run an experiment. My board is really hammered into my head, running experiments, testing out hypothesis, proving out the changes I want to make in our business. So that's the thing I would recommend to you is run an experiment. Say, we see that on install, our technicians on average are 85%, but we've got 3 who are 50% efficient based on how many hours it takes them. And the jobs are all the same. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to run a install class. Maybe it's an install class in your warehouse. Maybe you send them to a formal install class like our BAS 300 Startup at Checkout course. Either way, you put them in an install class. And then at the end of that install class, over the next 6 months, you measure the efficiency. And if you see that they go from 50 to 75%, that's a 25% efficiency increase, which is a decrease in hours to do a task and an increase in revenue and profit. So you can streamline that out because those efficiencies should remain the same if they're doing the same task for the foreseeable future. So now you've captured efficiency through the life cycle of a technician. There's numbers across the board about life cycles of technicians. It's really a company by company thing. Some companies are able to hold people for 3 years. Some people hold them for 20. So if you say average technician retention is 5 years, so for the next 5 years, you've gained a 25% efficiency across that task for that person. This is going to result in increased profits. This is going to less burnout. This is going to faster execution of backlog, more quality installation. You can start to see how all of this comes together. Let's talk about retention. A lot of businesses I work with right now are really focused in on retention, and rightfully so. Like I said, we've got a smaller pool of candidates than ever before. Like, we're trying to hire salespeople, and we, in my opinion, are a good company to work for. Work from home. We're very mission focused. We're changing the industry. Feel like we have good pay and benefits. It's a enjoyable company, in my opinion, that's changing the industry. It is still extremely hard to find people. You read about how we're not adding jobs. You read about how like people can't find work, but yet you put a job ad out and it's finding qualified people to do, in our case, the sales role that we have open right now. It's extremely difficult. So it's very important when you do find someone who's talented, who's good, to retain them. And yes, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, salary, right? You've got to be paying a competitive salary. But I've seen time and time again where there's a threshold to salary. Now, obviously, salespeople are more monetarily focused than non-salespeople typically. But there's a ceiling of salary at which people are satisfied and it becomes something else. It becomes about self-accumulate. I don't know how to say that word. That's embarrassing. But some of you are like screaming at me, Phil, it's so easy to say. I'm from the South. I can't speak English half the time. But the reality is a lot of people want to do something more than just collect a paycheck. They want to make an impact. They want to have autonomy. They want to self-direct. They want to be working towards a purpose, towards a mission. And part of that is self-development. People want to be developed. They want to know. I crap you not, talked to multiple companies who they lost their people because they did not have a development plan for their people. And they either lost someone they were trying to hire because their competitor had a better training and development plan, or they lost someone because they didn't invest in that person and another company was willing to. A good portion of techs do this stuff, do the field work because it's interesting to them. This is a hobby to them, working with their hands. It's fun. It's like adult Legos playing with this stuff. You can, in a world where you don't feel like you're making an impact half the time, the ability to wire up, program something and see it working in the same day, it's cathartic. It feels good. But what doesn't feel good is when you're getting beaten by the stick of I'm a failure. So you show up at the job site, you don't know what you're doing, everyone's yelling at you, you're beating your head against the wall of how do I do this integration? I don't remember how to do graphics. How do I do these points? I don't get it. And you keep messing up. The commissioning agent is more than happy to throw you under the bus. And it's like, oh man, I am so tired of failing all the time. And then ABC company comes along and they say, we've been looking for someone just like you. And not only will we give you a $2 raise, like nothing, right? It's peanuts, $4,000 a year. But we're also got this full training program. We're going to bring you in. We work with this company called Smart Buildings Academy. Hey, kudos. And they'll assess where you're at. They'll tell us what your gaps are. And then we're going to put a full training plan together for you. and you're going to go out into the field now. Birds are going to fly through the sky. The clouds are going to part. The angels are going to sing, and you are going to rejoice because you know what you're doing now, and life is good. And that's the reality of going and doing training for your people. It's truly an emotional thing. It's hard to show an ROI, but we all know the cost. I will tell you, hiring someone new, you're looking at 1 year salary investment in that person, between the time you as a leader have to take, your teammates have to take, shipping material, going and working with these people. It costs a lot of money. And if you can eliminate that turnover and get efficiency from that person at the same time, you're in a really solid place. And once again, this doesn't have to be a class. I would love you to take our classes, love you to put your people through our free skill assessment. 25,000 folks have gone through it. It's a good skill assessment, tell you exactly what gaps you have. Would love you to do that. But at the end of the day, if you just bring people into the warehouse and give them exercises and have them do work and invest in them, show up early to meet with them at the job site to kind of guide them through stuff, people appreciate that. In a world where people aren't investing in their techs, you will stand out. All right, so let's close this up. At the end of this episode, what I hope you've heard so far is there is a business case for training. At the end of the day, it's really relatively simple. You take the cost of training plus the cost of being out in the field plus the cost of travel, and then you look at what are the efficiency gains? What are my potential retention gains? And then you extrapolate year one efficiency gains to do a simple ROI. And then you look at your payback by looking at what are your efficiency gains going to be for year 2, 3, and 4. You want to make sure that this training is focused to skills that people are going to actually need to know in your next 3 months worth of backlog. Like if you're not going to be working on chillers, probably doesn't make sense to send them to a chiller training in the middle of December. Probably not a good use of idea. Just like sending them to boiler training in June, probably not a good use of idea if you live in Southern Arizona. Probably not going to use that skill quite a bit. So make sure you're making sense of what you're sending people to. As always, everything's available at podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/514. Once again, that's podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/514. There you can find access to our 514 podcast episodes, mini courses, skill guides. You can find access to our courses that you can purchase, our free technical skill assessment. It's all there. And my last ask to you, if you found this valuable and you're watching on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, please do that. On LinkedIn, like, comment, share. On Facebook, like, comment, share. And on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please consider giving us a 5-star review if you feel like we've earned it. Thank you all so much. I look forward to seeing you in a future episode, and I hope you all have an awesome week. Take care.